So the story of the World Series is three different categories: wins, losses, and chokes. Now, this is a part of history that no Bob Gibson fan wants to talk about. But did he choke in Game 7 against Detroit in the 68 World Series, which led to the Tigers winning the title? Well, it all depends how you look at it, but like I said, he entered the final game coming off 5 straight World Series victories. He was dominant in 67 against Boston, won his first 2 games against Detroit. But this contest featuring that pudgy starter Mickey Lolich against Gibson, people would say, hey, Gibson's going to win, but this is not what happened. It ended up being 4-1 Detroit in one of the most bizarre 7 innings of all time. In a fitting end to this series, in the final game of Roger Maris's career, who was with the Cardinals, the two teams' hottest pitchers, Mickey Lolich and Bob Gibson, squared off in a classic duel until an infamous hit over the head of Curt Flood ended it. Now, did Curt misplay it, or was it Gibson not monitoring strike zone enough? We don't know. Like McLean in Game 6, Lolich was, Denny McLean, of course, was starting on only 2 days' rest. Lolich and Gibson matched zeros for 6 innings, but at the top of the 7th, Gibson surrendered 2-out singles to Norm Cash and Willie Horton. Jim Northrup then hit a hard smash to deep center. Curt Flood, who won numerous Golden Glove awards in his career, misjudged it. I saw the play. I don't think Curt would ever catch it. It was Gibson's ball to control. And Lolich had all the runs he needed. Flood has been criticized since then by some who believe he would have caught the ball had the first steps been back instead of in. Curt Flood has gone on the record, said, I didn't expect they're going to hit the ball that hard, and here it happens. Because Bob Gibson, again, very, very dominant. Jim Northrup said, Flood slipped a little, but the ball was 40 feet over his head. He never had a chance to catch it. However, his teammate Denny McLean claimed in his 75 book that Flood blew it. Orlando Cepeda, in his 68 autobiography, Baby Bull, 98 autobiography, assessed that Flood would have caught the ball had he not misjudged it. In the October 29, 68 issue of the Sporting News, both Flood and manager Red Shondies indicated they would have expected the normally sure-handed outfielder to catch such a ball. By starting in, Flood had the ball in reverse direction and regained his acceleration. He then slipped on the wet grass before recovering his speed, and by that time the ball was well beyond him. But then again, Gibson gave up chintzy singles before that. It's not up to Curt Flood to be Bob Gibson. Bill Freehan, the all-star catcher for the Tigers, then doubled in Northrup. At the top of the 9th, Don Ward added an RBI single. The Cardinals got a run in the 9th on a Mike Shannon homer, but it was all as Lolich pitched his third complete game. The final out of the series was recorded when Bill Freehan caught a pop foul from the very next batter, Tim McCarver, who was the battery mate of Gibson. Gibson struck out 8 in the losing cause, giving him a record 35 strikeouts by one pitcher in a World Series. But records are like farts, they're not meant to last. Lolich was, of course, named the World Series MVP. This is the last World Series game to date to feature complete games from both starting pitchers. Now, there's no color version of this, but I think the only version exists is a CBC kinescope with Canadian commercials like the full game, so if you're looking for it. Now, ironically, Cardinal shortstop Dal Maxwell, a very, very good defensive player, went hitless in 22 World Series at-bats, which was then a record. Now, the Tigers really dominated the early innings of the series. According to the weighted score, they outscored St. Louis 34-27, even though the Cardinals had 61 hits. 400,000, close to 400,000 people attended the series, with average attendance 54,000 to 239. Now, the Denny McLean was the other big starter for the Cardinals, and the Gibson had won Game 4 on a five hitter, and beating McLean as well. McLean was pitching with 2 days rest. Now, Gibson also pitched the opening game of the series against Denny McLean, and he pitched a 6-hitter. Now, that was the game, of course, where Lou Brock had the big hit. He struck out a record 17 Detroit Tiger batters in the contest. So how did it pay out here, ladies and gentlemen? Lolich won 3-0. Again, the Denny McLean, who was pitching, I think, on 4 days rest, he won Game 6, which made the 13-1 victory, but made Game 7 possible. So Did Curt Flood misjudge the play? No. Did Bob Gibson lose control? Yes. Bob Gibson was the type of person, give me the ball. But I watched that inning, and you could see Gibson was kind of fading a little bit. Now, if you had a reliever like Rolly Fingers or Dennis Eckersley or Eric Gagne, the famous Canadian reliever, I think they would have won the game, but I think they kept him in too long. Because, thinking that Bob Gibson was going to pitch a complete game every game, which up until that time he probably could. But if you notice the stats, ladies and gentlemen, Gibson would rarely give up 3 consecutive hits, and that's what killed him. And Earl Weaver, which I don't like very much, would always kind of study the 3-run homer. Look what happened with George Springer that got them in the World Series. If you hit enough 3-run homers in a playoff series, that's going to be to your benefit. Now, this was the last World Series before the divisional format with the expansion with San Diego and Montreal and the Pilots in Kansas City on the other side. So the idea about this series, according to historians, is one of the best of all time. And the Tigers, again, it was their 3rd title in history. 84 was also great against San Diego. Now, the Tigers came back down for 3-1 to win it, and of course, Lolich was the name MVP. He remains the last pitcher to earn 3 complete game victories in a single World Series. In his 3rd appearance in the series, he had to pitch after only 2 days rest in deciding Game 7 because regular 31-game winner Denny McLain was moved up to Game 6, also in 2 days rest. In Game 5, the Tigers' hopes for a title would have been jeopardized had Bill Freehan tagged out Lou Brock in a home plate collision on a perfect throw from left fielder Willie Horton when Brock elected not to slide and went in standing up. Now, 68, of course, was called the year of the pitcher, and the series featured dominant performances by Gibson and Lolich. Now, in that season, Gibson came up with a regular season ERA of just 1.12, a modern era record. He pitched complete games again in 1-4-7. In Game 1, he threw a shutout, throwing out 17 batters, which defeated Koufax's 63 record by 2, and it still stands as the top strikeout performance. In Game 4, a solo home run by Jim Northrup was the only offense that the Tigers were able to muster, as Gibson struck out 10. Again, the Curt Flood misplay, again, I'll leave that for history. Now, the World Series saw the Cardinals lose a Game 7 for the first time in their history, but not their last, of course. This was the 6th World Series of the 60s to go to full 7 games, the most of any decade. The Tigers were the 3rd team to come back from 3-1 to win, last being the Pirates in 25 and the 58 Yankees. And since then, it's been done by the 79 Pirates, the 85 Royals, and the 2016 Cubs. Now, the 85 Royals, of course, came back from 3-1 down against Toronto as well. Now, the Detroit manager Mayo Smith received some notoriety in a set for moving outfielder Mickey Stanley to shortstop for the 68 World Series, which has been called one of the gutsiest coaching moves in sports history by multiple sources. Stanley replaced his superior fielding but much weaker hitting Ray Oyler would make 2 errors in the series, neither of which led to a run. Again, the final series for the expansion. Now, all 7 games of NBC's TV coverage were preserved on black and white kinescopes by CBC and circulated among collectors. Games 1 and 5 have been commercially released. These broadcasts and data of Game 7 were frequently showed on Classic Sports Network and ESPN Classic in the 90s and 20s and 2000s, but again, the CBC commercials. Because I think CBC, they felt that carrying the Detroit series, because sometimes CTV would get it too. So, ladies and gentlemen, whether Curt Flood choked or Bob Gibson, the Cardinals choked. And chokes happen a lot of times. Look at the Toronto against Seattle before beating them in the playoffs this year, Seattle a couple of years ago. So, Bob Gibson, one of the best players of all time, but that 7th inning was just too long. And the thing is, Sean Dice, you go with the horse that brung you, and sometimes the horse comes up lame. That's how it happens. And you would never think Curt Flood would be blamed for being bad on defense. He was a tremendous player, one of the most underrated players in baseball history. So if you like what we're doing here with our World Series podcast, let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share.